TikTok, it's time to rock. Hello, everybody. You're welcome to another great episode of United Nations System. A quick flashback. Before now, we have been able to analyze precedent leading to the formation of United Nations. We also went further to analyze League of Nations, and we did justice to failures of the League. We also introduced us to United Nations, and we dealt with the structures of United Nations. During the structure, we spoke about the General Assembly, the Security Council, and the Secretariat. We spoke about the International Court of Justice. We spoke about the Trusteeship Council, and we spoke about the Economic and Social Council. We also went ahead to deal with the difference between the League of Nations and the United Nations. And today we are having a wonderful topic to deal with, which is the peace concept. The word peace is a global word. As simple as it sounds, there is no consensus by scholars on one agreeable definition of the concept peace. One would have believed that because of the general understanding of the word peace, scholars should be able to peacefully sit down and come up with a general definition that will be accepted by all. If we should ask 100 people of their perception of peace, they will give you different perceptions and understanding or meaning of peace to them. It will interest you to note that that word peace is very complex because peace to Christianity is different from peace to Judaism. Peace in Judaism is also different to peace in Islam, and that is how it goes around. Christians will tell you that Jesus Christ is the Prince of Peace, and without Jesus in your life, you cannot experience peace. And furthermore, for the Christians, they believe that peace is an internal experience. That is, you experience peace from the within, inside of you, through Christ Jesus. And for Islam, the definition of peace can be seen in the framework of total submission to the will of Allah. When you are able to have a perfect and total submission to the will of Allah and believe in His Prophet, the Anabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you will be able to experience the peace that comes from only Allah as a result of your total submission. And for the atheists, they believe that peace is a decision. You can decide to be peaceful and you can also decide not to be peaceful. Peace is a choice made by men. Atheists also believe that people that are tied down to religion always pretend to act peaceful because they have an abstract belief that there is a life after death. And that is why they have decided to act peacefully because of the reward. We can go on and we will never end. But notwithstanding, we have a framework of definition we can use for the purpose of peace in relation to United Nations and the international system. To this point, we will define peace as a concord, an agreement, an amicable resolution that is aimed at attaining friendly relationship. Peace is an idea of harmony and tranquility. It is an idea of life after conflict had occurred. In legal terms, peace is a treaty, a binding commitment to resolve violence. It could also be a treaty which is left for the both parties to implement and enforce to resolve conflicts. It is also important for us to note that peace is a multidimensional and multi-layer concept. Peace is a product and also a process. It is not possible for you to be a peace scholar without talking about Johann Galton, who is popularly known as the father of peace. Johann Galton made a distinction between positive peace and negative peace. According to him, negative peace can be summed up to be mere absence of military confrontations or physical exchange of hostilities. This is to say that for the mere fact that a community or a society is not experiencing war or civil war or battles or any confrontation or physical assault does not mean that that particular society is totally peaceful. That society is just experiencing what John Galton called negative peace because because there could be the existence of social injustice. John Galton also argued that positive peace is the existence and the institutionalization of social justice and freedom within local and global contexts. This is to say that when there is freedom of expression and there is enactment of the rule of law in any country and there is human rights being acknowledged holistically with an institutionalized view of social justice, then that community is experiencing positive peace. What I am saying in a nutshell is that negative peace is the absence of physical violence, while positive peace is the absence of structural violence. Now that we have gotten a very strong foundation of the concept peace, we will be moving to peacekeeping, peace enforcing, and peace building. Peacekeeping. This is a concept in diplomacy which involves the deployment of nationals or multinational forces for the purpose of helping to control and resolve an actual or potential armed conflict between or within states. Peacekeeping operations are undertaken with the authority of and are always being led by the United Nations. There are cases and situations whereby regional organizations have been able to conduct peacekeeping operations. In some cases too, singular states can also undertake such operations as well. And during these missions, the mandate given to the soldiers is to make peace between the warring parties. There are basically three principles of peacekeeping. Number 1. Consent of the parties. 2. Impartiality. 3. Non-use of force and ammunition except in self-defense and in defense of the mandates. The stand of the first principle is very clear. This means that you cannot just come into any war without the consent of the warring parties. The second principle also stands very clear. You just have to be neutral. Whenever you're coming in between two warring parties, you must make sure that you don't take side with any of the parties. You are meant to be there to resolve the issue and not to support a party against another party, not to support a group against another group. As long as you are in for peacekeeping operation, you must remain impartial, just like the incorruptible judge. The place of the third principle can never be negotiated. You are not meant to force any group to the table. You are not meant to participate or get yourself involved in unlawful war because that is not your mandate. You are there to make sure that you facilitate a mediation process. You are there to make sure that you initiate a negotiation process between the warring groups. Peace enforcement. This involves the application of coercive measures which include the use of military forces or troops in order to enforce peace. This can be done only by the direct authority of the United Nations Security Council to restore international peace and security in the face of either threats to the peace or in a case of a breach of peace or in a case of an act of aggression. It is also the use of military measures to compel disputants to stop fighting in a case where they have decided not to adhere by their treaty that they have signed. It is mostly used to impose peace and restore ceasefire, which can be placed with or without the agreement or support of one or all of the groups. A mandate can actually change from being a peacekeeping mission to a peace enforcement mission in a case whereby warring parties or warring groups decided not to abide by the treaty that they have signed. In some occasions, during peace period, during negotiation process, some groups try to use that period to acquire weapons, try to use that period to acquire different strategies, and during those periods, they use their strategies to outshine other groups. So whenever they begin to use these strategies or using different ways or methods to outshine other groups, it is possible for the mission or the mandate to be changed from being a peacekeeping mission to a peace enforcement mission. A peace enforcement mission can also occur through different means. Apart from using military arms, it can also occur with imposing sanctions on those countries. This was the same issue that happened in Iraq when Iraq decided to take Kuwait as part of its own province between 1990 and 1992. And apart from the United Nations using military forces, they were able to use sanctions, economic sanctions, to avoid them trading with other nations. At the same period too, the United Nations troops went to Kuwait and forced out the the Saddam Hussein troops, that is the Iraqi troops, away from Kuwait, and Kuwait was liberated again. Although some critics have said that the United Nations was able to successfully assist Kuwait because of the richness in oil, but irrespective of the richness in oil, irrespective of the reason behind it, it was a peace enforcement mission, because at the end of that mission, the Iraqi soldiers suffered a lot of damages and they have no other choice than to evacuate Kuwait. Peace building. In general terms, we can see peace building as a process that facilitates the establishment of durable peace and tries to prevent the reoccurrence of violence by addressing the root causes of those violence and their effects. We cannot talk about peace building without talking about Boutros Ghali. He was the former Secretary General of United Nations. In 1992, he made a report which he called the Agenda for Peace. He introduced the concept of peace building in the United Nations. According to him, he defined peace building as an action to identify and support structures which will tend to strengthen and solidify peace in order to avoid a relapse into conflict. Boutros Ghali, in his Agenda for Peace, classified peace building into two categories, which are pre-conflict peace building and post-conflict peace building. Pre-conflict peace building is supposed to be a preventive measure that will aim to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, to promote and implement human rights and the rights of minorities in any nation. This has to do with putting in place measures to control small arms and light weapons, measures to improve policing and judicial system, monitoring human rights, election reform, social and economic development, and institutional reforms. While post-conflict peace building takes a long-term focus and incorporates the goals of both negative peace and positive peace. Don't forget we said that negative peace is the absence of physical violence and positive peace is the absence of structural violence. So post-conflict peace building must address the underlying causes of the conflict. While doing this, must make sure that the protection of lives and property are taken seriously. During this process, there must also be respect for human rights. During post-conflict peace building, there is this assurance and assumption that the war has ended. So therefore, there will be plans towards reconstruction. There will be plans towards disarmament. When we say disarmament, we're talking about lay down weapons and collection of weapons, both small weapons and light weapons. This is called arms proliferation in international politics. There must also be reintegration of militants and ex-disputants. And finally, government reforms cannot be eliminated from this process. In the case of the Nigerian-Biafran War, all of this was being packaged in the 3 R's of the Gowon regime. The 3 R's was about reconstruction, reconciliation, and rehabilitation. That was what was the second national plan of Nigeria from 1970 to 1974, immediately after the Nigerian-Biafran War, as a post-conflict peace-building syndrome to heal the nation after the devastating war. So with all of these, we have the holistic view that peace building is a professional field that deals with the actual work on ground, the actual work of implementing strategy to prevent violence and change the real cause of violence. This is summarized as peace building being a prevention syndrome and a social change, which can happen at the interpersonal level, social or societal level, and global level between nations. Now, it is important to note that peace builders do not necessarily believe that the whole world can be 100% peaceful, but some significant change can be achieved towards a peaceful international system. So therefore, there must be and there is a good balance between practice of peace and theories of peace. This is to say, peace is practical, it is not just theoretical. At this point, critics and new generational scholars have established a wonderful point that there is a need for a paradigm shift from peace building to sustainable peace building. They argue that United Nations and other intergovernmental organizations that deals with peace building should see it from the point of view that peace building needs to focus more on change from the within rather than just investing on reconstruction, security, and economic paradigm. The individuals should be focused upon, the groups should be focused upon in order to ensure sustainable peace building. building. They must ensure that the people, the community, take it as their own. They must also make sure that the locals and the agencies from below, these agencies from below are the locals, that the locals model their own ownership by their own selves. They understand this problem more, so they will be able to address it by themselves. What the organizations need to do is to just create a perfect platform for them to act. In many nations, they have been able to establish peace building operations, peace building programs, and yet it have not been able to resolve the causes of those conflicts. We can see that in Somalia, we can see that in Afghanistan, we can see that in South Sudan, we can see that happening in the Middle East, we can see that in Nigeria. The Biafran agitation is still there after over 50 years of peace building operation in Nigeria. So what they are saying is that don't just focus only on the institutions, don't just focus only on peace building that have to do with proliferation of arms, that have to do with social justice. Try to invest more on the people, try to invest more on the groups instead of wasting resources promoting democracy, globalization, capitalism that is even making the problem worse. Alright, that is that about that. Right about now, we will be drawing up the curtain at this point. We will be having an assignment, and the assignment is this: write on failures and successes of peace support operations of United Nations around the world. This assignment is meant to be submitted on or before 11:59 on Saturday, 11th of April 2020. My email will be displayed below the screen, so kindly pick up the email from there and endeavor to submit the assignment as at when due. And remember to stay safe. Hopefully the school resumes soon. Talk about your confusion. If you dey check your motor, my brother, oh yeah, conduct. Swaps.